The scent of damp earth and decaying wood clung to Daniel and Eliza as they emerged from the underground passageway beneath the church. The ancient corridor had led them straight into the forest bordering the forgotten village, a forest that had long since consumed its own paths. Night fell fast, unnatural and suffocating. The trees, gnarled like grasping hands, leaned inward as if to listen. Eliza clutched the mirror shard wrapped in linen, while Daniel scanned their surroundings, alert to any movement. They both knew this wasn't just about solving a curse anymore, it was about surviving it. They pressed forward, following cryptic directions they had pieced together from the diary of Reverend Marcus, the priest who had once served the village before descending into madness and ritual. Beneath the weeping willows, where the shadows gathered to pray, lies the altar of the eye, untouched by light or day. They found the grove just before midnight. A ring of weeping willows encircled a sunken glade. In its center stood a stone altar, carved with the same runes found on the mirror shard. The stones seemed to hum with energy, reacting to their presence. Daniel's breath fogged in the air despite the warmth. "This is it," he whispered. Eliza unwrapped the shard. Its surface glowed faintly, almost eager. She stepped forward and laid it onto the altar. Nothing happened. Then, a sudden scream tore through the silence, high, guttural, inhuman. The trees shivered. From the woods emerged figures, cloaked in tattered robes, their faces hidden behind bark masks carved with the eye symbol. The same cult that once performed the rite of the loop centuries ago, but these were not just descendants. They were the same members. Frozen in time. Daniel stepped in front of Eliza instinctively. "You've returned what was taken," one of them rasped, voice like wind scraping bone. "The eye sees. The eye waits." The cult formed a circle around the altar. One by one, they began to chant in a language neither Eliza nor Daniel recognized. The shard pulsed. The runes on the altar ignited. Eliza's vision blurred as a wave of dizziness hit her. Suddenly, the world shifted. They were no longer in the grove. They were back in the village, but everything was different. The buildings were whole. Smoke curled from chimneys. Children ran across cobblestones. Laughter echoed. It was the village before the curse. "Are we in the past?" Daniel muttered. "No," Eliza said, voice trembling. "We're in the loop." The time loop Reverend Marcus had bound the village to centuries ago, the unending cycle of sacrifice, blood, and worship. Somehow, the cult had pulled them into it. A bell tolled from the church. People began to gather in the town square, eyes glazed, bodies stiff like puppets. Reverend Marcus stood at the center, arms outstretched. At his feet lay a woman bound in vines, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. It was the woman in white. The villagers didn't see Daniel and Eliza. They moved around them, oblivious. Eliza reached out to touch one of the children, but her hand passed through like mist. "We're spectators," Daniel whispered. "This is the original ritual." The Reverend raised a knife. "To keep the eye open, to protect our eternity, let this vessel bleed." The blade descended. Eliza screamed. The scene shattered like glass. They were back in the grove. The cult still surrounded them, but their faces now visible. And horrifying. Skin pale and stretched. Eyes hollow yet aware. They weren't living. They hadn't been for centuries. "You witnessed the birth of the loop," the leader croaked. His face was twisted with age, and yet ageless. "You are now part of it." Daniel looked at Eliza. "If we're part of it, maybe we can end it from inside." He grabbed the mirror shard from the altar. It vibrated violently, resisting. "Only blood may seal the eye," Eliza remembered. "Not just any blood. The marked." She looked at her palm. Since they'd entered the loop, the symbol of the eye had appeared, burned into her skin like a birthmark. She was the marked. With trembling hands, Eliza placed her palm on the shard. It seared her flesh, but she didn't pull away. The cult howled. The altar cracked. The trees convulsed. Time itself bent and fractured around them. They were pulled again, this time into the house at the edge of the village, the same one Daniel had dreamt of. The haunted house. Inside, the walls bled. Mirrors lined the hallways, each one reflecting a different version of Daniel and Eliza. Some dead. Some possessed. Some lost. The cursed object, the mirror, was not just one shard. It was a fragmented consciousness. A prison holding infinite versions of the loop. They needed to find the original mirror, the core. They climbed to the attic. There it was. A full-length mirror covered in blood and vines. The reflection inside didn't show the attic, it showed the altar. The loop's source. Eliza stepped forward. "This is it. Once you enter, there's no return," Daniel warned. "I know." Together, they stepped into the reflection. They were back at the altar, but now it was crumbling. The cult screamed as the mirror began to absorb them one by one. Their bodies twisted into smoke, their souls pulled into the glass. Eliza collapsed. Daniel caught her, but her body was cold. The mirror spoke, not in words, but in emotions. Pain. Hunger. Loneliness. The I was never a god. It was a consciousness. A sentience born from the pain of the villagers who had died, cursed to repeat their trauma endlessly. The cult had fed it. Worshipped it. And now, it wanted Eliza to become its new vessel. But Eliza whispered one final word. "No!" She shattered the shard against the altar. The mirror exploded. The light devoured everything. Daniel awoke alone. The village was gone. Or changed. The buildings were ruins again. The forest was silent. The mirror shard lay in his hand, cold, dull, powerless. There was no sign of Eliza. But the symbol on his palm remained. And somewhere deep in the forest, a mirror awaited another gaze. Then she started walking. Not moving, gliding, her feet never touching the ground. Every candle on the floor reignited as she passed, casting long, chaotic shadows on the cavern walls. Daniel pulled Eliza behind him, holding his phone's dim light like a shield. "Run," he whispered. But Eliza stood frozen. "She's wearing the pendant," she breathed. "That's my mother's." Daniel's heart dropped. They had assumed Eliza's mother had vanished in the fire that consumed Willow Creek Mansion decades ago. But the pendant was unmistakable, an old silver chain with a ruby center shaped like a flame. It had been passed down through generations. There was no mistaking it. "Eliza," Daniel said, gripping her arm. "We need to go." But the woman in white raised her arm, and the stone door behind them slammed shut with a thunderous boom. Then everything went still. The humming from the mirror shard in Eliza's bag grew louder, almost angry. Daniel reached for it. "We have to give it back." The moment he touched it, the cavern shuddered. The runes around them lit up in blood-red fire, illuminating ancient writing crawling along the walls like veins. The woman's stitched mouth began to split, not tear, not break, but unravel, string by string. She whispered through the broken threads. "The door was never meant to open. Not for you." Daniel dropped the shard. It didn't clatter. It sank into the stone like it was being absorbed. The glowing runes dimmed. Then, the time gate opened. A spiral tore into the air in front of them, like a vortex of shattered mirrors and screaming voices. Through it, they saw flashes of other timelines. Matt Carter banging on the door to room 217. A faceless man standing in a motel hallway. A circle of hooded figures surrounding a girl tied to a chair, chanting in a tongue that tasted like iron and ash. Eliza screamed and fell to her knees. "It's all connected. The motel. The cult. The shard, it's not just cursed. It's a key." Daniel stared into the vortex. One of the flashes showed himself, but older, worn, insane, laughing inside a padded cell. The mirror on the wall behind him was cracked. "Close it!" Eliza cried. "We have to close the gate." "But how?" Daniel shouted over the roar. Then came the voice. "Only blood breaks the loop." The same message Matt had seen. Eliza looked at Daniel. "I think it needs a sacrifice." He shook his head. "No. No, we find another way." But she was already pulling the dagger from her boot. The one they'd found upstairs beside her father's final journal entry. If I don't return, the mirror must never be made whole again. Eliza, stop! She pressed the blade to her palm and whispered. I'm not losing myself to this place. Not like Mom. The moment her blood hit the stone floor, the vortex screamed. The runes flared so brightly that Daniel had to shield his eyes. And then, silence. The spiral collapsed. The light died. The cavern was empty. No woman. No voices. No vortex. Daniel was alone. He looked down. Eliza was gone. No blood. No dagger. Just a mirror shard lying still on the ground, humming faintly, like a heart still beating. In the distance, the motel bell dinged.